2006-07 school year, and we're going to be doing some presentations for you. We'll start with our English poem, our Kiswahili poem, our French national anthem, our physiology poem, a chemistry experiment, and two of us will show our portfolios. Enjoy. So we'll start with the English story, and the title of it is Broken and in Love. Sky was lying on her bed staring at the ceiling. Her body was full of bruises, though she felt no pain. She was numb. She wondered why she was even born. No one wanted her. Her auntie definitely didn't. If she did, why would she hit her or tell her she was worthless? Sky's aunt's voice replayed in her head over and over again, and she had begun to believe her. If I die, there'll be one less useless object in the world, Sky thought. Dying would probably be easier than living with her abusive aunt. Maybe I don't deserve to die. My aunt's actions are probably my punishment for being so worthless, she thought. Sky had been living with her aunt for 3 years. Before that, she lived in a lovely house with her parents. Her mom and dad were amazing, but they often traveled out of the country for work. One night, after her parents had left, Sky got a phone call. She was devastated. She cried for weeks. After a while, her sadness was overwhelming. Sky wouldn't get out of bed. She wished she was the one who had died in the car crash. Then she wouldn't have to feel that unbearable pain.
A few days later, Sky got home from school late, at about 7 p.m., to avoid her aunt. She didn't switch on the living room lights. Streetlights illuminated the room, lightening and shortening some furniture in the house. She stopped at the doorway and listened. Her aunt wasn't home. She placed a robe that she'd kept hidden in her room on the dining table. She stood there, calmly, reading and deleting messages from her old battered phone. She got on YouTube and watched her tutorial. She then sat on the sofa in that grave of silence, hearing the dull faraway sounds of neighbors closing doors or a toddler crying. She showered and cut her nails while still in the shower. She slipped into a pair of black sweatpants and a black shirt. She made a noose the way she had seen it done on YouTube. She climbed the coffee table and tied the rope around the fan, yanking it down a bit, testing it. She pulled away the coffee table and replaced it with a stool. She gingerly stepped on it. Once the noose was around her neck, her mind was clear. She stood there, taking a breath. She then kicked the stool. Her aunt found her on the floor, the noose around her neck, her face bloodied, an ugly gash on the back of her head. The fan, ripped from the roof, seemed to have fallen on her head. Her aunt panicked, somehow thinks darkly. This is my chance to get rid of her. Sky started slowly from a bottomless place, eyes slowly fluttering open. She didn't see anything. It was blurry, whitewashed. She could hear sounds, though far away. They could have been people or machines. She felt woolly in the head. When her eyes finally opened and she was able to feel handing over her, she was looking down at her with the same expression one would have when looking at a very expensive and affordable watch on display. With a starting realization, she recognized the ample woman, her aunt. She tried to open her mouth to speak, but the effort was overwhelming. Just then, a man in a suit approached her aunt with a paper in hand and said something that Sky struggled to hear. Sky slowly turned her head and saw a beeping machine. She hadn't realized she was in the hospital. She tried to remember how she got there, and when finally all came back to her, she distractedly brought her hand to her neck, feeling the soft scar. She smelt it. It smelled of old flesh. Suddenly, she realized that the heaviness from her head was from the bandages around it. She felt mortified by her failure to take her own life. At that moment, her aunt came up to her and scoffed. Tomorrow you'll be finally taken to a psych ward where wretches like you belong, and you'll be my problem for much longer.
She and other patients were taken. Some had bruises and scars, some talked to themselves. She felt the sadness and emptiness. As she was taken to the institute, she felt like crying, but tears wouldn't flow. As they reached, a nurse was waiting for them. She entered the institute and felt like all the happiness in the world had gone, and it would never come back. A short woman welcomed her and took her to her room. They passed many floors until they reached a small door, and the nurse opened it with a small key. It had a single bed, a toilet, and a small sink.
It's been 3 days since moving to the mental institute, but she still had many mixed emotions. It was mostly pain and the rest was numbness. She couldn't feel anything. It was a good thing because she did not want to feel anything. In the cafeteria, a therapist next to her asked, "Are you alright, miss?" He was tall, looked like he was in his mid-30s, very healthy, mixed skin color, had a deep voice, and wore a white cloak with rectangular specs and had smooth, silky blonde hair. She replied with a small nod as to say yes because her voice refused to work. Holding back tears, she peeled open her banana and took a huge bite out of it. She then went back to the serving area to grab a burger that looked like it was picked out of the sewer. Alongside it was a cup of old-looking yogurt that had chunks of cream in it. At the corner of the cafeteria, where it was quiet, the only thing she felt was the cold metal table top on her skin. "I do not want to eat," she said again and again in her head.
Out of nowhere, a man's laughter came echoing from the hallway. A tall, chocolate-skinned man in handcuffs arrived at the cafeteria, with 2 guards holding him. The second he walked in, she shared a romantic stare with Sky. Sky's heart skipped a beat. 10 minutes, he was told by the guards. He sat by Sky and said, "Sup, newbie?" Sky looked away, ignoring him. "You don't speak, huh? My name's Jason. What about you?" He said while about to break into laughter. "Time's up," said the guard to the left of him. "Sky," she said loudly before he left. At dinner time, Sky was starting to drift off. Her eyes started to go foggy as she daydreamed about nothing. "Sky, Sky, Sky," Sky said Jason. Sky woke up to see Jason's hand waving in front of her face. "Sorry I was rude earlier," said Sky softly, still very shy. "It's cool." They shared some small talk and got to know each other. "So what got you in here?" said Sky. Changing the subject, Jason said, "What is your favorite food you get here?" Sky took that as a sign he did not want to talk about it. They started to hang out every mealtime and snuck out during the night to watch the stars at the small courtyard. Jason would have mental breakdowns, not knowing what to do. The guard called Sky. Sky helped him through them. He would cry, scream, laugh throughout the breakdowns. Days turned into weeks, weeks turned into months. He told her about his life outside of the mental institute, like the fun stuff he did, like the time he stole a red Toyota. They grew closer to each other, and the relationship grew stronger. One day, Jason said in a jokey manner, "We should break out of this dump." She thought it was a joke at first. Jason was always insane. She laughed and said it would be impossible and we'd soon get caught. Soon they'd be planning their great escape to freedom. It took them a month to get organized. While they were ready to get out of here, they started with many ideas, but one came up on top. For some time, they noticed that the fire alarms, once activated, opened the cell doors and the fire doors. Since they liked to sneak out during the night, they would get in trouble a lot and had kitchen duty cleanup as punishment. It was the night of their escape. The plan was in place. "It's time," said Sky, stacked with adrenaline. They took a matchbox and some lighter fluid and set it ablaze. The alarms went off and the doors opened. They ran as fast as they could. Surprisingly, no one tried to stop them, not even the guards, because of their busy containing the other patients. They're excited and proud of themselves. "Woo, woo, woo! We are finally out," said Sky. Jason smiled and continued running into the distance.
They ran through the deserted streets, hand in hand, the distant wailing of cop cars echoing behind them. The moon's pale glow reflected in Jason's chocolate-brown eyes, which glinted with an eager excitement. He led Sky to a dusty old red Toyota that stood next to a pile of rotting trash bags. "Stand back," Jason said with a sly smile, as he lifted one of the many cracked bricks that littered the ground and smashed the driver's window. Large chunks of glass flew in every direction, shattering into little pieces when they hit the ground. He carefully placed his hand through the shattered window and with a click unlocked the car. He sat in the driver's seat and began tampering with the wires and buttons until the dirty console flickered and lit up. Jason slammed the accelerator and the car jolted forward. "Where are we going?" asked Sky. "I have no idea," Jason said without worry. They drove aimlessly through the sleeping city, speaking of the wonderful futures they would share, with no doubt or hesitation. As they spiraled through an empty street, a colorful neon sign advertising creamy ice cream made Sky's stomach rumble loudly. Jason smirked and asked, "Want to get ice cream?" "How are we going to pay?" asked Sky half-heartedly. A mischievous smile crept on his face. "Who said we're paying?" 15 minutes later, Jason and Sky were running out of the ice cream parlor with piles of different delicious ice cream flavors, coated in sweet sprinkles and chocolate sauce, carefully stacked on one single ice cream cone. The cool night wind ruffled through Sky's strawberry blonde hair as Jason sped into the night. The perfect combination of sweet vanilla ice cream melting in her mouth, Jason's hand in hers, and the adrenaline pulsing through her veins made her feel euphoric. Sky felt free, as if she could finally fly after being trapped in a cage her whole life. "I want to take you somewhere special," Jason said affectionately, but before Sky could ask where, he was blasting his favorite song on the battered car radio, singing off key. After a few minutes of driving, Sky realized they were heading to the south side of the city, as the buildings began looking worn down and badly maintained. Her mother had once warned her to never come to this side of the city because it was extremely dangerous, but with Jason she felt safe and secure. Over the months she had spent with him, she completely forgot about the time she lived with her cruel aunt, as if it had never happened. Before she met Jason, her life seemed blurred and without purpose, but now she trembled at the thought that she almost took her own life and never would have spent the rest of her life with him. After half an hour of driving, they arrived to a tall building that stood on a slope near the edge of the city. Graffiti covered its rough concrete walls, and all the windows were boarded up. They climbed an old rickety fire exit, which spiraled to the roof of the building. From the top, Sky gaped in wonder and mesmeration at the glowing city that lay at her feet and the dazzling stars that scattered the endless sky. "What do you think?" asked Jason, with a smile. But Sky was lost for words. She was too overwhelmed by the outstanding scenery that stood before her. They sat on the cool roof's ledge, legs dangling dangerously in midair over the twinkling city. Sky rested her head on Jason's broad shoulder while they enjoyed their delicious ice cream. Sky's mind wandered as she gazed at the passing cars below, when a colorful billboard caught her eye. Written in bold gold letters read, Fly to Peru for only $100. "We should fly to Peru," Sky said abruptly, pointing at the billboard. Jason immediately agreed and said it would be a great way to start a new beginning. They began mapping out a plan how to get the money and where to stay in Peru. 3 days later, Sky and Jason were breaking the thin glass doors of a small convenience store, Jason holding a heavy handgun at arm's length. "I want all the money you got," Jason yelled at the plump, sweaty man behind the counter as he pointed his gun menacingly at the cashier's chest. The cashier began quickly piling bills into a large brown paper bag with trembling hands. Just as the cashier was handing the full bag to Jason, a piercing bang echoed through the room, followed by an agonizing yell and the loud thud of a lifeless body hitting the ground. "What are you doing?" yelled Sky with a look of terror and confusion. "This isn't part of the plan." Jason just chuckled while lifting the heavy bag, which was now drenched in warm blood. He threw the handgun at Sky, which she caught instinctively. "Jason, what's going on?" she said with the edge of panic in her voice. But before she could say another word, he was sprinting to the car and speeding off into the night.
Sky lay on the ground, her hands soaked in blood, mind fogged, barely functioning. Between the blaring sirens around her and the screams of pedestrians, she felt overwhelmed. She stared into the eyes of the victim as he bled out in her hands. His blood gushed out of his chest rapidly, leaving the tiles on the floor stained a deep red. She panicked. The sounds of sirens were getting louder and louder each second. The room was lit red and blue from the headlights of the cop cars, and out the window she could see the figures of cars becoming clearer and clearer. "Jason!" she yelled, but he was nowhere to be seen. He fled the scene with all the money, leaving her helpless on the ground. A loud, echoing voice in her head kept on yelling, "Murderer!" She could have tried to run, but she had no will left to move. She felt betrayed. Her heart had broken into millions of pieces. She felt as though someone stabbed her in the chest, like a painful wound that wouldn't heal. Before long, the sounds of the sirens were much louder, ear-splitting, and she knew the cops had arrived. They bolted in the shop. Sky was on the floor, covered in blood. Sky was on the floor, covered in the blood of the shopkeeper, with his corpse laying in front of her and a gun beside her. She had the same facial expression of someone who had seen a ghost. Emotionless, numb, some would say. She felt a cold touch on her wrist. It was a police officer handcuffing her. Flustered, her vision began to decrease slowly, and everything was blurry. They threw her violently into the car, and her eyes blinked a few times before everything went blank. A white blinding light awakened her. She was in a room covered with grey walls. A tall detective sat in front of her. Outside the door were two guards. After she had fully woken up, she realized she was being investigated. The tall man in front of her asked, "What happened that night?" She didn't respond. She didn't have any energy to speak. She felt broken, still in denial. How could he do this to me? Did I mean nothing to him? She asked herself. The one person who made her feel whole, happy, and actually made her smile again after all this time stabbed her in the back. She felt like she had lost a part of herself. The feelings of emptiness that she hadn't felt in the longest time were back. She felt as if there was a void in her life, desperately needing to be filled. The room was dead silent. Sky did not respond to any of the detective's questions. Instead, she sat there with no expression on her face. She was pale as a ghost, with no testimony. She was deemed guilty for the murder.
Outside the building, Sky saw a black van with two guards standing beside it. She was thrust inside by one of the guards. She looked out the window. The sky was a tar black and large clouds were gathering together. People ran for cover outside, and umbrellas opened as the drops of rain began to fall. They left the police station and began the journey to the prison she would be held in. Suddenly, the car came to a stop. She stepped out of the van to find herself standing in front of a tall grey building. The paint was peeling off the side of the walls, and there were guards posted all around the area. She could hear loud noises coming from inside the building as she slowly made her way towards it. The inmates inside gave her a terrifying look. The building looked even worse from the inside. It reeked of old soap. She was led to a small room hidden in one corner of the building. The room was empty except for a bed and a nightstand that stood on one side. Time in prison went slow, although she had only been there for a few weeks. It felt as if she had been there for years. Even though the incident had happened weeks ago, she couldn't help but relive that night in her mind every day. And when she did, the wound in her heart grew deeper and deeper. She was still hurt. She didn't want to live like this anymore, questioning herself. All she wanted to do was disappear. The pain was different than before. Too much for her to bear. Maybe I should just die and free this world with the burden of my life, she thought to herself. It was a Monday morning. Another one of those useless sessions, Sky said in a low monotone voice. A guard escorted Sky to the guidance and counseling room. She sat down on the stiff gray chair. "Good morning," said the therapist, but there was no response. The room remained in eerie silence for the next 30 minutes or so. The therapist grabbed a container of antidepressants from her drawer and called one warden into the room. "Make sure she takes this. She really needs them," said the therapist in an annoyed voice. Every evening, a warden would give her a pill. She would keep the pills in a box hidden under a loose floorboard in her room. Slowly, the pills grew larger in number. One day, she opened the box to see that she had over 20 pills. She scooped them up into her hand, looking at them intently, but she had no reason to live in them. She put all the pills in her mouth at once and gulped them down. She felt a sharp pain in her chest, almost as if she was stabbed with a sword made of pure steel.
She could hear her heartbeat pounding. Her head was spinning, and her vision grew cloudy. She stumbled, leaning against the wall to keep her balance. Everything went black, and she fell to the floor with a thud. When the guards came to check on her, they found her corpse laying on the floor, motionless. Sky's corpse was covered in dust and looked like it had been there for a long amount of time. A foul odor wafted through the room. It was coming from the corpse, which was now dezoned. The guards hurriedly called for backup, but when they finally arrived, it was already too late for Sky.
2 years later, Jason moved on with his life and left his past behind. It was an average morning for Jason. The sun shone brightly through his window. The birds chirped a sweet melody. Honey, a voice came from downstairs. It was Jason's wife, Mosessa. Come have something before you go out for your morning run, she said calmly. I'll get a cup of coffee and a scone from an espresso cafe, said Jason hurriedly. He wore his running track, kissed Mosessa goodbye, and set off. The cool morning air hit his chest as he walked out the door. Bye, echoed his voice as it slowly disappeared into the distance. There was not a cloud in sight. The weather was perfect. 10 minutes later, he arrived at the coffee shop. It smelled like freshly cut flowers with a hint of vanilla. 2 medium cups of coffee, please, and a scone, he said to the cashier. Would you like anything else with that? No, thank you, ma'am. He grabbed his number and went to the eating area. 3 minutes later, number 56 was called out. Yes, Jason replied. He grabbed his things, paid, and set off. He finishes one coffee and he's about to throw out his cup. He sees an old torn up newspaper hidden underneath a trash can outside. At the corner of the paper, he notices someone familiar. After taking a closer look, he immediately recognized the picture. Sky, he says in a weary voice. Thousands of memories come flooding back to him. The flashbacks of all the amazing things they did together. He proceeds to read the paper, and tears start streaming down his face. The paper said that she had committed suicide while held in prison 2 years ago. He froze in shock. All he could feel were mixed emotions of sadness and guilt. This is my fault. I killed her, he said, breaking down in tears. He fell to the ground, spilling his coffee all over his pants. But he was numb with pain. In those few seconds, he couldn't feel anything. He wished he could turn back time and take her place. But he could only blame himself for her death. It was too late. She was dead, and there was nothing he could do.
Suicide, the act of an instant or taking one's own life voluntarily and intentionally, or a person who commits or attempts suicide. Some things that contribute to suicidal thoughts. 1. Abuse and trauma. Sexual, physical, and emotional abuse increase the suicidal attempts. To cope with their pain, think about suicide. PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. 2. Access to weapons. Guns increase the suicidal attempts for people who struggle with mental or physical illnesses. 3. Relationship problems. In a relationship or ending relationships can lead to suicidal thoughts. They might lead to ending of the person's life. Suicidal thoughts are symptoms of underlying issues and they can be treated. It's not the only way out. Sky had tried suicide before because she thought she wasn't good enough, and then she meets Jason and he betrays her. Then she commits suicide with pills. Don't commit suicide. You're not only hurting yourself but hurting others.
Dear parents, as we continue watching, just to let you know that that was a story that they created by themselves, with each student getting a part to write, a paragraph or so that they wrote down. So we are going to have Kiswahili next. Please come.
Karibuni tena, tungo kuwaleteni, ni tungo lililobayana, kwa makini sikizeni, ila naumia sana, na kunitanda huzuni. Hili janga la korona, limetutia maswalini.
Ewe Mola Subhana, twakuomba tuauni. Limepanda kila kona, kote kote duniani. Si Ufaransa, si China, limefika zikizani. Haibagui korona, watu wote mashakani. Linatisha wangwana, mejionea nadhani. Ewe Mola Subhana, twakuomba tuauni.
Jamani, hiki kirusi kimetuacha tabani, kimesambaa kwa kasi kama moto wa nyikani, kimeenea wasiwasi kote kote duniani. Wauliza adinasi, jamani kitakwisha lini?
Ewe Mola Subhana, twakuomba tuauni.
Bonjour à tous, je m'appelle Sarah.
Je m'appelle Annika.
Je m'appelle Shika.
Je m'appelle Jemima.
Je m'appelle Ifa.
Je m'appelle David.
Je m'appelle Nathan.
Je m'appelle Portia.
Je m'appelle Moses.
Nous allons chanter l'hymne national française. Bienvenue.
Allons au phare de la patrie, le jour de la grande arrivée. Contre nous de la tyrannie, l'autre la sanglant élevé, l'autre la sanglant élevé. Autant debout dans les campagnes, mugissent féroces soldats. Ils viennent jusque dans vos bras, et vos fils, vos campagnes. Aux hommes citoyens, formez vos bataillons, marchons, marchons, ensemble un peu, à vous, nos sillons. Aux hommes citoyens, formez vos bataillons, marchons, marchons, ensemble un peu, à vous, nos sillons.
The body. The man's body and the woman's body is sacred. No matter who it is sacred. Is it the Venus one in the laborer's gown? Is it one of the dull-faced immigrants just landed on the wharf? Each belongs here or anywhere, just as much as the well-off, just as much as you.
Each of us give or her place in the
The
procession.
procession. The world is holy, the soul is holy, the skin is holy, the nose is holy, the tongue is holy,
The tongue and cock and hand and asshole holy.
everything is holy, holy, every day is in eternity,
Every day is in eternity.
every man's an angel,
This skin,
this
this
sack
sack
of
of
dung
dung
and
and
joy,
joy, this flea floating like a compass needle inside night time, always dividing West
Africa's dusty horizons. They don't fit into little pits and places. These hips are free hips. They don't like to be held back. These hips have never been enslaved. They go where they want to go. They do what they want to do. These hips are mighty hips. Such is my unseemliness. I hate my epidermal dress.
the
The savage blood of sanity, the rhymes of my anatomy. It is a burden I have to do with. Tubers and fruits, oozing their jammy substances, a heart of roots. My assistant took them back. Stretches and colors assail me. This is a long tree. Its orchids are splendid. They spot and coil like snakes.
The heart is a red bell bloom in distress. I am so small in comparison to these organs. I warm and hack in a purple wilderness. With so much before me, so many emerald trees, and green whitened fields, mountains and lakes, how could I not be only myself, this dream of flesh, from moment to moment?
There's some in the back of me.
So the butter burner are lifted.
No, you don't. Yeah. Why do you? Oh.
You show the button burner because it will be seen.
And then introduce it.
Moses shows the matchboxes.
No, it's for the matchbox.
And then Moses shows the matchbox. Moses, you show the matchbox. If you want to mention matchbox, Moses will show it. So for our first chemistry experiment, we're going to be burning magnesium strips. So magnesium strips are silver, metal, shiny strips. They're easy to bend and break, like I just broke a piece right here. And we are going to be burning them. So for this experiment, you're going to need obviously the magnesium strips. Then you're going to need a Bunsen burner, tongs to hold the strips as we burn it, and a matchbox to light the Bunsen burner. So the first thing we're going to do is turn on the Bunsen burner. Then we're going to cut 2 pieces of magnesium strips, one for each person. And we'll hold it with our tongs. Like that. Then we'll put the magnesium strips in the fire and watch what will happen. Yeah, be careful with fire because you could burn yourself. And also, as these burn, they're also very hot. So, as you can see, The light is very, very bright, it's blinding, and it's a white flame. At the tip of the flame, it's a little yellowish, and it's releasing a gray or whitish smoke. It's also making like a sizzling noise. And as I said before, if you go close to it, it's very hot. And when they are finished burning, they'll become a white powder, and that's the experiment. Thank you.
So I can start. So next we'll be looking at how iodine granules burn. What we'll need for this is a Bunsen burner, a deflagrating spoon, a spatula, and iodine granules, which are solid, hard, small balls that are silver and shimmery. So we'll use the spatula to scoop the iodine granules and put it to the deflagrating spoon. Then we will turn on the Bunsen burner. And place a deflagrating spoon above the flames. The iodine granules are producing a dark magenta smoke that has a bad pungent smell. They have melted into a silver liquid. As you can see, it's very, very hot because it's burning the paper, but it's silver. This liquid will soon evaporate. I can even smell it, it's very nauseating. Thank you. We hope you enjoy it.
Okay, so now I'm going to show you two of my portfolios that I've done. One of my portfolios I've done. So this is the portfolio. It's my African history one. They'll just show a few pages.
And I'll be showing my statistics, a few pages of my statistics portfolio.
So thank you so much, parents, for joining us. So that was grade 7. I'm so happy to have been with them this year. And let's meet in grade 8. Right? Thank you so much. Goodbye.